So for the past 12 years, I've started off every conversation with my name is Blake Sanders, and I'm a husband, father, landscape architect, planner, former mayor of the town of West Pelzer, former professor at Clemson University, and this year I'm blessed because of you to add your representative in the State House for District 9. I always start out by saying that I'm a husband and father first because people mean more to me than anything else, and especially my wife Ashley and my two children Lane and Gracie. And the reason that's important is that's why I wanted to be a public servant. 2011 to 2015, I served 4 years on town council in West Pelzer, and then in 2015 decided that I would take the plunge into the executive branch and be the mayor of the town of West Pelzer. A town of 1,200 people, which grew by about 20% during my tenure without annexation. We were able to look at some very conservative policies, and as far as rolling back taxes, working to increase public safety, and from there I knew that I could continue to make a difference if I invested in people. The reason that I continue to invest in people today is because there are so many that have invested in me over the years, whether that's current or former mayors or senators or representatives. I can look back across and see conversations that I had with Mayor Crenshaw or conversations that I've had with Mayor Roberts or Mayor Burgess in Williamston, and they continue to invest in me as a person first. And so I look forward for the next 2 years to investing in the people of District 9 first. And I always say people over politics. So I grew up on a gravel road in the unincorporated area of the town of Pelzer, Joe Black Road. We grew up surrounded by farmland, which is still farmland, but blessed to grow up in that community because I went to West Pelzer Elementary School, Palmetto Middle School, Palmetto High School. And so being mayor with the school that you grew up in your municipal boundaries is vitally important, because I got to go talk to all of the grades about local government and how government's not out to get you and we're not out to tax you to death. We want to create policies that are best for the people. And so now I get to look back in 2016 when I went to the first 5th grade class to talk about local government. Well, that's almost 10 years from now, and so those 5th grade students now have their own families, or they're in college now, and they get to come back and they still call me the Mustache Mayor, which is always fun to see them in the grocery store with now their little ones or their spouses. There were still some teachers there that I had in school, so it was always different to walk through the hallways with a lapel pin on, saying that I was the mayor and knowing that I grew up there. We did have some really good administrators while I was in elementary, middle, and high school. Specifically, Principal Doug Atkins, who's on the school board. He probably gave me my last paddling while I was in high school, and then Dr. Mason Gary, who's also on school board. Both invested in me as a student, even though I excelled in classes and graduated very high in my class. They knew I didn't test very well, so they worked with me with an SAT score that barely got me into Clemson. They worked with me to kind of help find the profession that was best for me. I was extremely artistic. I loved to talk to people, so I started off actually in education. And I found out really fast that while I love children and I love talking for 8 hours a day was not something that I could do and teach the younger generation. And so I switched to architecture and then ultimately landscape architecture. But I did have one teacher specifically, Susie Turbyville, who lives in the city of Anderson. She was my launch teacher, and she took us to Washington, D.C. It happened to be the week that Nixon died, but she took us to D.C. so that we could see our local senators, so that we could learn how the federal government works. And then we went to Charleston and talked about similar things, and then ultimately in Columbia and talked. And one of the things that I remember from that trip was meeting Strom Thurmond. And whether you agree or disagree with his policies or his history, it was indifferent, because the one thing that I remembered about Senator Thurmond is that he shook every student's hand in line and had a conversation with them. If you've ever heard Senator Thurmond talk, no one understood what he said, but he had a conversation with each one of us. Fast forward, 15 years, and I'm having a meeting with Senator Billy Odell. I can't remember what we talked about. I'm sure it was related to DHEC consent orders or water or sewer, but he made it a point to talk to everyone in that room and shake their hand, and you could understand what Senator Odell said. And so it was, to me, those were the two statesmen that invested in me, not with intent and purposefully, but I watched what they were doing. So I can probably thank Susie Turbyville for introducing me to the federal, state, and local government. So in 2004, while I was at the university, it was time to start our internship process and our study abroad process. And so I had the opportunity to either go to Barcelona, Spain, to go to Genoa, Italy, or I could go to Istanbul, Turkey. And so I chose to go to Turkey to study the old history of architecture. It was a place where I knew that a lot of the Gospels had been written, and so I wanted to look at architecture and landscape architecture and city planning from that standpoint. So when I returned, when I went for my interviews for Design Workshop, which was out of Colorado, Hughes, Good, O'Leary, and Ryan, which was in Atlanta, ultimately I chose to go to work in Atlanta for my internship in the urban design department. And so being able to work on projects in downtown Atlanta, new cities such as Sandy Springs that was growing at the time, really started to pique my interest into how cities were planned, why they were planned the way they were, and how local government could influence some of those decisions. And so I took a job in Greenville upon graduation, a company called Seaman Whiteside and Associates out of Charleston. And during the recession, I didn't want to lose my job. And so my boss at the time, John Derone, said, we have this project, and I don't know who wants to work on it, but it's some kind of trail. It's on a rail. I don't really know much about it. So I raised my hand and said, I would love to work on that project. I did not own a bicycle. I'd never designed a trail in my life. And so I got to work with Ty Houck, who's the director of Greenways for Greenville County. And I was the landscape architect of record for the Swamp Rabbit Trail. That allowed me to travel the country and talk about how local government can invest in open space and green space and multimodal transportation and recreation, which then led to me working on regional and national projects. I've worked in 48 states on greenways, trails, or city planning exercises. And then in 2017, I thought, what a better thing to do than start my own company. So I started Studio Maine, where I could focus on small rural communities, specifically in the Southeast, and teach them some of the things that I'd learned along the way about how growth can look, how you can be smart about it but still be pro-growth, how open space can influence your quality of life, which then impacts the number of jobs that can be brought to your area. I'm blessed that I continue to get to work in municipalities and cities and counties from Louisiana to D.C. all the way to the tip of Florida. I've learned in Columbia for freshman orientation and then organization at the State House that everyone has a strong suit. And so for me and talking with the Speaker of the House and other members, I was placed on the 3M committee, which is military, medical, and municipal affairs. And so I will get to specifically take my skill set and look at policies that impact municipalities, whether it be local fire, public safety, local zoning ordinances. I'll be able to look at the state level policies for that. And so again, I can't stress enough the skill sets in Columbia. Everybody kind of finds their way to the committee or to the organization that best fits them. The other great thing is, as far as a subcommittee, is I'm on the Legislative Oversight Committee. And so every 7 years, every state agency is reviewed for their efficiency and how their strategies go back to the General Assembly. So are they following the policies, the guidelines, and the budgets that the State House sets? And so I'm blessed to be on that committee because now I get to start reviewing state agencies and I get to do deep dives into certain agencies and learn more about them. I believe that I was placed on that committee this year because the Conservation Bank is one of the agencies that will be reviewed this year. And I've been blessed to do some work over the years with the Conservation Bank, and understanding how they work in a detailed level now will definitely help other landscape architects in other cities understand how they can preserve some of the agricultural lands that they have. I'm blessed to have worked with all members of the delegation, having worked in all the municipalities and all county council districts in Anderson County. And so I'm well aware of what's happening throughout the county. I'm well aware of how we need to work together to make sure Anderson County remains the best place to live, work, play, and learn. I probably already knew maybe 50% of the legislators that were down there just from working in different areas or counties with them in their respective cities and towns. And so a lot of of times I was already traveling to talk about funding or financing strategies for new parks or new streets or new government buildings that would be happening in the city. And a lot of times those representatives and senators were already part of those conversations. So it was a little bit of a homecoming for me to get to walk into the State House the first time. The main thing I've heard from the citizens is, can you help get our roads paved? And so I'll be working with our local CTC, our state and county, to make sure we've got a really good list of roads to be paved over the next 10 years. And that's what I want to make sure that constituents understand, that plans for road paving are set years in advance. And so I've already touched base with the County Transportation Committee, the county, as well as the DOT, so that I could get a list of roads that are scheduled to be paved for next year, those that are planned, and those that they're already looking at for the next 10 years of paving. Hopefully something that's a list that I'll be able to produce to then distribute back to the constituents. The other thing that I've heard is, can you actually lower income taxes? And this year, it's one of the Republican goals to reduce income taxes dramatically this year. While we won't be able to go to zero like our friends in Texas or in Tennessee, I'm hopeful that we are able to collectively come together and collaborate on a bill that will significantly reduce those income taxes. My first term, I want to learn from those that have set the path forward, and that is regardless of party or politics. It's about people first. And so I'm there to learn, I'm there to listen, and I'm also there to make sure that I continue to talk with those that pave the way. I will be cautious, but I will be optimistic in every conversation and every opportunity that I have. If you Google Blake Sanders, I promise you that my cell phone number will come up. You can reach me at blakesanders@schouse.gov if you want to email me, and my cell phone number is 864-617-0347. You can call or text anytime, but just know after about 9 p.m. I'm starting to lay low and get ready for bed.